News Update with the certified most accurate weather team at First Coast News.
Hey there, Jacksonville. I'm meteorologist Robert Spetta here with First Coast News. I'm the digital meteorologist here, always streaming here with you. And, our number one goal here at First Coast News, give you the latest information on what we're tracking out here in the tropics. No hype, although, a lot of times people say that's what we do. It's never my goal. Never get any more pay for kind of talking about where his storm is headed or anything like that. The key thing is just give you the latest information, keep people educated so you can make proper decisions, and also just kind of talk a little bit about what's happening out here in the world of meteorology. So we're not only going to talk about Jerry here, some coastal impacts on the Florida coastline all the way through the Carolinas due to a bit of a nor'easter is also in the forecast. And let's take a look at the global tropics and how it could even impact the weather across the east coast of the United States when we're looking at a typhoon off of Japan. Yeah, that's a little lead in right there for you. First off, though, excuse me. Let's talk about Tropical Storm Jerry. Now, the latest on this has 65 mile per hour winds moving towards the west-northwest at 18 miles per hour. Pressure is now down to 999 millibars. Key thing in Meteorology 101, the lower that pressure is, most often the stronger the storm is. It shows you that, the deeper it is, kind of the deeper that cliff that falls off towards that low-level center, and thus the higher winds. All right, so current location's about 300 miles towards the east-southeast of the northern Leeward Islands, where, in fact, there are tropical storm watches in place here today. Taking a look at this, that is a C-130J flying around the center of a tropical storm Barry. It found a pressure at 1,005 millibars, wind speeds at 54 miles per hour at its max wind speed. But then we also have a separate plane that was flying around in there just a few moments ago. It looks like it's headed back towards the Leeward Islands here. Wind speeds were found about 63 miles per hour. That more closely matches up with the current intensity being estimated by the National Hurricane Center. And let's take a look at water vapor imagery because, before we show you the forecast, number one thing you always want to look at right off the bat is where the satellite is seeing or what the satellite picture is showing. You always want to get that real-time information so you can get an idea of what's happening around it right now. And the key thing is the low-level center is actually on the northern periphery of this. So even though it's tracking off like that, a lot of the convection is just south of that circulation. So a good portion of even the Windward Islands are going to be impacted by this, despite the fact it's passing well towards the north. One of those key reasons why, we always show the cone of air and that center line with it, but you do want to look at the broader impacts of a tropical system. And this goes back on the East Coast. It's not just a Caribbean thing. You want to look at the broader impacts, see kind of where the worst of the weather is. And you can see right here with Jerry as it heads off towards the west, the bulk of the convection is just south of where that low-level center is. You do have those tropical storm watches in place. I'll get to that in just a second. And then it's going to turn towards the north, getting hooked by a trough and kind of kicking off towards north and east. And even if we look at, let's say we didn't have any models, we were just looking at the satellite picture, or we had ship obs out here that was telling us we have this kind of easterly and then westerly flow with all the clouds right in here just like that, we would know this is going to make that northerly turn and eventually shift off towards the north and then towards the north and east just based on the overall background flow. And then you can see off towards the west, we basically got this front that's dipping in from the north and east right there. You see that? So that is also going to usher this along as well. So yeah, there's a look at your current watches and warnings, some of the places that will be impacted. In fact, I say watches. Looks like we have a warning up. Just one of the islands here, Codrington. That's one of the cities on that island, part of Antigua. They are under a tropical storm warning. You can even see just towards the east, kind of a little bit of that low-level circulation starting to approach. But as I mentioned, the bulk of the convection is just south of the low-level circulation. So maybe your places down towards Barbuda are also going to be looking at some, this Fort de France, Bridgetown, all of these spots a little bit further towards the south are still going to be looking at scattered showers despite, the warnings being a little bit off here towards the north. So it's a good example of why you want to look at the overall kind of impacts from these things. Taking a look at our extended outlook, though, with the models, we do have a couple hurricane models, the HMON being one, taking this closer to Bermuda, but those trends have been west of the overall consensus, and it's been shifting back towards the east as we've been monitoring this. So the general ensembles and the forecast even keeps us east of Bermuda in that extended outlook, which is great news for Bermuda. They're still recovering after Hurricane Imelda and Humberto both impacted that island, back-to-back storms, and now another one, if it did head off into that direction, would be rough to say the least. So good news is that it does look like it is staying just towards the west of them there. Let's take a look at our ECMWF guidance. And while I'm scrolling through, I do want to pull up some of our socials, see if we got any questions or anything like that anybody may be jumping in on here. So let me just pull that up really quick. And if you are watching us on any of our socials, shoot me a message on here, and I'll do my best to kind of keep you up to date. All right, there we go. I've just found our Facebook page. So if you have any questions on there and you're watching, shoot us a message. All right, so here's a look at the ECMWF, kind of basically watching Jerry move off towards the north and west here. And this is by Saturday and into Sunday. And you can see this kind of little low just towards the south of Bermuda. So that little, let's start this over. So here you go. Jerry is just towards the north and east of Puerto Rico. You see this moving off towards the north. You can see Jerry kind of heading just towards the east of Bermuda. But look off the east coast of the United States. What there's that. Look at that guy. That is not a tropical low. It's more of a westerly type setup on the tail end of a cold front, but it is going to be bringing just as much messy conditions for the east coast of the United States. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But right now, the key thing is we do have tropical storm watches, and now the latest update here at 11 o'clock, there's actually a warning out there in the Caribbean. No direct impacts on Florida or the east coast for that matter, but waves are going to be developing, but really they're going to be secondary to the big nor'easter we're going to be tracking. That's going to be the big topic. And here's a look at kind of our future cast of basically Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday. We're going to continue to see this onshore flow setup as we begin to see a bit of a new area of low pressure develop off of the east coast of Florida. See those white lines? Those are what we call isobars. If you didn't know, let's say you're new to the meteorology game, that's what you always see on a lot of our weather maps. The closer those lines are together, as you're seeing just off of the first coast, just east of Georgia right there, and see that really kind of tight bunching up, that indicates higher winds. That's what we call pressure gradient winds. And as we go ahead through Friday and the Saturday, there's going to be a little bit of a low developing basically due east of Jacksonville, which is going to help tighten up those pressure gradient winds, increase the winds out of the northeast. During high tides, I expect water levels to back up right around this time frame throughout the day on Friday. In fact, Friday afternoon's high tide, I believe, could be one of the highest of the year. Not trying to hype this or anything. Once again, it's just reality of it. You got that onshore flow. We're getting away from one of the naturally highest tides, which was earlier this week, the king tide, as we had that super full moon help push up those waters. And then you have a strong nor'easter on top of that, combined with passing heavy showers. That's going to be one of the big issues here. And this is what we're talking about with the winds. I was just showing you kind of a map there. But there you go. Sustained winds, 20 to 30 miles per hour up and down the east coast of Florida. Combine that with the showers and those already high tides, especially right here where I'm showing you a pulse rate around 11:30 to about noontime on Saturday, and also on Friday. Let's actually rewind this to about Friday, right around noon. So right there, you got that northeasterly wind. You already got the high tides about noontime up and down the Florida coastline here. That's really what's going to be causing maybe some coastal flooding. And we also have coastal flood advisories, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get some warnings here over the next few hours for places like Duval County, the intracoastal up and down this area, and also along the St. Johns River. Once again, this is not tropical, but it is going to have those tropical-esque impacts. High tide, gusty coastal conditions, which 34 mile per hour winds is tropical storm strength, look at this. There's going to be spots where, we're going to be seeing sustained up near about 30 to 34 miles per hour. So, or I should say 39, I believe. Yeah, sorry about that. But we're going to see winds up there nearly that high at times. Yeah, and this is the highest tide actually on Friday, and I believe with the winds combined with the high tide, this is going to be about the time frame for these specific locations that you could, not that you will, but if you are in one of these kind of flood-prone spots, you could see some flooding in some low-lying areas. Places like Heckscher Drive, just north of Jacksonville, parts of the Intracoastal. Dutton Island is another one, and a lot of these kind of low-lying areas along the river could be looking at a little bit of flooding here. And even, yes, near the Bridge of Lines, St. Augustine, classic coastal flooding there right near the fort is possible. All right, so what I want to do is I want to pull back the broader picture here. Let's look to the other side of the world. This is interesting. Typhoon Halong. It's just off of the Western Pacific here. It's just off the coast of Japan. Very some nasty weather. This was actually some images shot by an astronaut aboard the International Space Station. You can see like when this was right up to like that Cat 4, Cat 5 nearly intensity. They have the little mesovorts inside of it, mesovortices. It shows you just those walls, and that's why we literally call this an eye wall around that eye. But I'm not just showing you because there's a typhoon out there, and this is talking tropics, which I am, In fact, this actually brought winds in kilometers, 198 kilometer per hour winds to one of those small islands there just south of Tokyo. It's part of the Izu Island chain. But this is also going to kind of create a change in the weather pattern for the southeastern United States. And you're probably thinking, what? Hold on a second, Robert, here, you weatherman. What do you mean? A typhoon off of Japan is going to cause an influence in the weather for the southeastern United States, including the First Coast and Jacksonville. Well, you got to think that typhoons and hurricanes as well are just a big part of the atmosphere. They control things a little bit. So if you get this big typhoon coming off of the coastline of Japan, let's show this graphic right here. So let's say you get this big typhoon. Think of if you have a rope and you snap that rope and you get these waves that form along said rope. The typhoon is doing the same thing to the jet stream in the atmosphere out here. It's adding this energy and it's causing a snap. This happens quite often, especially in late season storms in the Western Pacific. So you get this big dip. Look at that right there. With that typhoon Halong, it causes a snap. Then you're going to get a big ridge set up over near Alaska. This is by Sunday and the Monday. That ridge is going to cause a deep trough off of the west coast. So we could actually look at some cooler weather, maybe even a little bit of snow for parts of the Pacific Northwest. But what goes down goes back up. That wave snaps, and then we get this ridge late week over the southeastern United States. Let's do that again. Let's watch this in fast. See the snap from that typhoon causes the ridge, causes a trough, causes another ridge. This is the same thing if you have like a hose or a rope or something and you whip it and it causes those waves in it. We've all done that, at least when we were kids. This is what happens. And if you take a look at the 6 to 10 day outlook for the southeast United States, warmer than normal temperatures are going to be dominating, and this is actually going to continue to shift off towards the east, thus bringing those warmer temperatures in our extended forecast, even for Jacksonville, parts of the First Coast. So sometimes people ask, hey, how far ahead can you look with the weather forecast? Sometimes I say, we can see at least somewhat accurately 10 days out. And it's not just looking at weather models. It's not just looking at, what your phone says. We often look at the other side of the world, at tropical systems, and see how that influences the overall jet stream. So when we look way ahead, what's upriver, it's eventually going to come downriver and it's going to impact us. Same thing if you were literally on a river and you've seen a boat floating your way, you're not just going to stand there and go, well, I'll wait for the model to say if it's going to hit me. You can see it coming. So that's kind of what we're looking at in that broader view in the tropical outlook. Kind of neat. I love me a little bit of science here. All right, let's look at the broader picture, though. If we go back to the Atlantic, we were watching an area off of the Yucatan that is now down to 0%. There is a low north and west of the Azores, 10%. That feels like Iceland's problem more than anything. Well, it's well towards the south of Iceland, but it could be an issue for the British Islands. This guy right here. It's 10%. I'm not really worried about it. So it's going to move off towards the north. And probably be some big waves for the British Isles, Portugal, northern areas of Spain, and the west coast of France. But it won't be tropical by that point by any means. So Jerry, at least for the Atlantic, is the big topic that we're watching out here. And then we also have Priscilla, which is located off of Baja California. You know what I found? I heard this kind of little interesting tidbit, and I feel like I probably should write a story on this later on. Look at the forecast for Priscilla. Now, this storm is weakening, but at one point the cone was kind of stretched off here to Arizona, and this is not the first storm to do that. Quite often you get that moisture that lifts towards the north, and it brings heavy rainfall across the southwestern United States. This was a little interesting tidbit, though. There has been parts of Arizona have spent more time inside the cone of a tropical system this hurricane season versus time spent inside of the cone in Florida. I hope I said that right. I hope you guys understand what I'm saying here. Parts of Arizona have spent more time inside of a cone of air from a tropical system versus the state of Florida. Pretty much any location in the state of Florida in 2025. I'm knocking on wood here, but if you think about that at first and you go, that's a lie, it has to be. But it's due to a lot of these West Coast systems that they don't make landfall by any means into Arizona, but that extended outlook with the cone as it weakens has been kind of pointing off in the direction, and we have seen a quite significant monsoon for parts of Arizona and over towards New Mexico here in 2025. Even those deadly floods, remember back around the 4th of July, that was due to the remnants of a tropical system off of the West Coast. So this is why, when you think of hurricane season, we always, of course, stress the Atlantic. That's what gets a lot of the attention. But the Eastern Pacific, and I guess for that matter, the Western Pacific, since we're talking about how that could influence the weather in the United States, is just as important because it may not be a landfalling full-on hurricane in your backyard, but it could influence your weather overall out here. So, yeah. Let's see if we got any other questions here on our social medias. I don't really see anything right now, which is fine. It's kind of a quiet day in general. But if you guys have any questions, maybe you're watching on Facebook, just shoot us a message there. I will do my best to answer it right away. I got still about 3-4 more minutes here, so hopefully I can get to it here with you. Let's take a look at the... I'm trying to pull up some new graphics here. First off, if you're just joining, let's go back to Jerry real quick before I start to wrap things up. Tropical storm, of course, Jerry. This is as of the 11 a.m. update, so this came up about 18 minutes ago. Winds right now are at 65 miles per hour. It's moving towards the northwest at about 18 miles per hour, and pressure is now down to about 999. It's got some good convection flaring up on it, despite kind of slightly being removed from the low-level center, which is on the northern periphery of that convection, but it is moving into an area that is going to allow it for some intensification. That's why there are tropical storm watches, and in fact, a tropical storm warning just now put out for Antigua here as it pushes just towards the north and east of the Leeward Islands, eventually increasing up to about a Cat 1 status as it moves towards the north and east of Puerto Rico, and looks like the forecast is going to continue to keep it towards the east of Bermuda. Good news for them. The big thing we have been talking about closer to the East Coast is not this tropical system, but you actually see this front that's dipping down off of the east coast. That front is going to have a low spin off of it on the back side of it as we go ahead through today, tomorrow, and into Saturday through Sunday. And I do believe that is going to be a bigger impactor on the east coast. It's not going to be tropical, but it is going to have these tropical kind of feels to it. High tides are going to be up, especially Friday about midday. We're going to be looking at scattered on and off showers. Could accumulate a few inches in spots, especially along the immediate coastline. Once you get away from the coast, it's not going to be an issue for the east coast of Florida. But, if you're right there on the beach, yeah, you're going to have kind of a wet day here on Friday and Saturday. The good news, a lot of this does clear out by Sunday, so the second half of the week, and things will be looking a lot better. But this is bad news for like the Carolina coast, even over towards the Outer Banks, where they have been getting hit by one storm after another, these strong nor'easters. This is definitely by Saturday into Sunday going to be some absolute messy weather for that area of the coastline here. So yeah, plenty to talk about, despite, when people see Jerry and they go, that's all you got to talk about. It's a fish storm. It looks like it's going to stay out to sea. I just spent the last 20 minutes going over the tropics here globally and that big storm off of the east coast of the United States that's going to be developing. Not tropical, but it's going to have those kind of tropical characteristics as far as the symptoms of it. You know what the problem is with that, though, is when you get all of these different type of weather systems off the East Coast, it does create a headache for shipping traffic. And not only, if we're talking about freight or anything like that, if we're talking about cruise ships. Yeah. And you might think, how did they decide where to go if we have several hurricanes out there? If we have multiple tropical systems, we got a big nor'easter, and there's actually a meteorologist that works behind the scenes making sure those ships go where they need to go to stay safe and people still have a good time on their vacation on whatever cruise ship. And I got to talk to Craig Seltzer. He is the elite meteorologist with Royal Caribbean, and he told me about kind of the challenges of that job and making sure ships get to where they need to be safely and people can still have a good time. So I'm going to leave you with my discussion with Craig Seltzer, the lead meteorologist of Royal Caribbean. Hi there, I am here with Craig Seltzer from the Royal Caribbean Group, and he forecasts the weather for your cruise ships as they are out to sea. And since Jacksonville, we have so much Navy personnel. We have a cruise ship terminal. A lot of people go out boating. So I'm sure a lot of people are just so interested in marine forecasting, and that is your specialty. So Craig, first off, thanks for talking with me. Could you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into this position that you are in now?
Right, so I was in TV for 22 years in Miami, in South Florida. So of course I experienced hurricanes and things like that. And then after a while I just thought, I need to try something else. I've done TV for a long time, I'm gonna try something else. And so I set up a little consulting business doing what's known as forensic maritime meteorology, where I would study shipping related weather incidents. Wow. And then Royal Caribbean had an opening, and I thought, well, this is like everything that I've done combined into one job. And so I joined Royal Caribbean Group in July of 2023. And basically what I do is I'm involved when there's a weather-based deviation. So if the ship has to change its course because of weather, or maybe miss a port or be delayed, that's when the captains reach out to me.
So, you just mentioned this, and I didn't realize that you were involved in forensics. When were you involved in kind of forensic for shipping?
Yeah, I had done it for several years kind of on the side, and then did it a few years ago more as a full-time job, and then the opportunity of a lifetime with Royal Caribbean Group came along. But the forensics really gave me the background and kind of the nautical experience to understand what ships can go through, how bad it can be during the weather. And so thankfully with that, I can almost anticipate safely how to move the ships away or suggest that they stay away from the storm.
So we're going to come back to that in a second because I do have a couple questions in regards to that. But can you tell me about your job with Royal Caribbean? Because you're talking about moving ships around safely. And I know when people want to go out on a cruise, they don't want a bumpy ride. So can you just tell me, you don't have to get into too much detail, but what's some of the philosophies behind making sure people get from point A to point B, they're on their vacation and they want to have a good time. So what's some of the philosophies that you make sure they get there on time?
Right, so first off, the bottom line is safety. Of course, we never do anything that's unsafe, and we're always thinking safety in mind. Second, I would say, is guest comfort. we don't want to take a route that goes through larger waves and things like that where there's ship movement. So we try to deviate or work the ships in such a way that we're avoiding the bigger waves and seas and ship movement like that. And then third, of course, is just we want the guests to have just a good time on their itinerary, where they're going and things like that. Weather does happen, obviously, but I think because I bring the company a meteorological background, sometimes I can anticipate where the weather's going to be bad so we can avoid it more effectively.
So in recent years, since around the state of Florida and just the Caribbean in general, we've had so many big storms. And we can even just talk about last year if you want, because there was so many, from Beryl to Helene to Milton. What was one of the most challenging ones that maybe you had during the hurricane season?
Anytime a storm, like a tropical storm or a hurricane, moves across multiple itineraries, it's a challenge because you have to effectively move the ships in a way that you're avoiding the storm completely, but still preserving the itinerary and taking the guests at least so that they have some type of enjoyable cruise. The frequency of storm-impacted, I would say, shipping events is cruise ship events is very, very small. We deal with it just a few. Most of the cruises, most of the voyages are good weather and great experiences.
And I guess, you're talking about you work with Royal Caribbean. This is a question I'm sure you get a lot. Do you actually go out on the cruise ships with them?
Yeah, every now and then I get a chance to go out. For me, it's a work type of situation. I visit the ships a lot in port. Sometimes I do go on cruises, but when you're working on a cruise, you're not kind of partaking in all the fun, and you almost have to change your mindset. I'm getting on, I'm not going on vacation, I'm meeting with the officers on the bridge and the captain, and then usually I'm working, if I'm on a ship, working the other ships from the ship weather-wise.
Now, I got a question, and because you said this earlier, you will never tell a ship's captain what to do. I mean, it's their ship, right? Do you ever kind of get in, some back and forth with them, and not arguing, but like, hey, this is what I see, and then they say this is what they see, and you kind of even out? Do you have any stories or anything like that?
So the captains are amazing. I mean, the experience they have, what they've seen is amazing. So I always give deference to the captain just because of their experience first off and foremost. I think that what happens is I just contribute to making a good game plan. And so maybe they're thinking this, and I might suggest, well, but this model sometimes is wrong, so we need to watch it. And the captains are so gracious also. I mean, I feel honored that they would even consider what I'm offering, but the back and forth that we do have is always very enlightening for both of us, the captain and me. They'll get some meteorological knowledge, and I get some nautical knowledge.
It's so interesting. Just a lot of people, when they think of meteorology forecasting, they don't think about like your job. They think about being on TV or something like that. So let's go back to the forensics that you were talking about, the job you used to do. A lot of people in Jacksonville, we know about the Alfaro. It was a local event there. From your perspective and your knowledge that you have, was there any lessons learned from that event as far as maritime forecasting?
Right. So, there were so many lessons from that tragic event, and I followed it very closely. Of course, I was even following Joaquin as I was based in South Florida. So watching the storm strengthen, watching the storm deviate from the forecast that it was supposed to be on. Anytime you see a storm, in my opinion, move south of west, it's just like, watch that storm. That's something to pay attention to. And it was fighting shear and everything, so I'm very familiar with that. And I actually went through the NTSB VDR, which is the voyage data recorder, and read the entire transcript, and just kind of was, for better or for worse, living what they were going through, knowing what was going to happen, and thinking of all the things. So I think the lesson from a weather point of view is, you never can take your eye off of a hurricane or a tropical storm. You always have to be aware of where it is, where you are with respect to it, and never take for granted that it could do something that you're not expecting right then. There's no perfect forecast. You always have to watch a hurricane.
Well said. And I got one last question for you, and it goes back to what I was saying about, most people, they see people on TV, they don't realize, we got researchers, we got people ship routing, anybody that's young, up and coming, maybe they want to get into your job. What is some advice that maybe you want to give them?
I would say, like, for a meteorologist for a cruise line ship?
Just meteorologists, operational meteorologists in general, maybe maritime forecasting. Cruise company seems nice, but, anybody like that.
Yeah, I would say just, pursue your passion. Do everything you can to, nowadays, of course, learn machine language, programming, anything like that that's going to give you an edge. think like what's coming and learn that. If I was going to hire another meteorologist, we have two now, me and my assistant, I would hire somebody that's got some computer modeling experience, but also some meteorology experience. So if you're a good computer programmer and you're into weather, you've probably got a job coming in the future.
Solid. All right. Advice there. All right. Thank you very much, Greg, for talking with me. I appreciate you, and we'll toss it back.